Hey guys, welcome back to Release the Craftin. Priscilla here with another episode of Storycraft. Can you believe it? It feels like it's been a millennia since I've done a Storycraft, and I am so excited to get back into it, and boy, oh boy, do I have a tale for you guys today. But I am going to say right up front that I'm going to apologize in advance if the sound quality on this is crazy. I am not recording in my usual location, and I'm also holding my microphone, so I'm trying not to gobble the mic, but also not to let it wander away from me as I sink into the inevitable abyss of my recording space. So, that being said, let's get into it. I decided I was going to do something holiday-ish. I don't think I'm going to do that all month long. It's not really my vibe. If you guys have been here for a minute, you know. This season, not my season. We just left my season, and I am bereft. So, I thought I would just tell you guys at least something semi-seasonal, because it's a story about elves. In fact, it's a couple of stories about elves. I'm going to tell you 3 different stories about elves from, of course, my good friends and your good friends, the Brothers Grimm. So, let's get into it. Each story is going to get progressively more upsetting as we go, and I want you guys to follow me along for the ride. So, back in the way long ago, there was a shoemaker and his wife, and they were poor, poor, dirt poor, broke as sin, and the man only had enough leather to make one shoe in his entire shoe shop. That's all he could do. They were so poor, they had no food. So it was either boil the leather and eat another day, or make a beautiful pair of shoes and maybe eat for another 2 days. So the man, who is an old man at this point, I'm just going to also add that in there. They're an elderly sort. Sets out the leather. He cuts it with his little molds and all the stuff that shoemakers do. I don't know the profession. I have no idea what the terms are. But he cuts all the leather so that he can stitch it up in the morning and make a nice pair of shoes. And he sets it out. So everything is all set up, ready to go. So then in the morning he can just jump to it, get to work. And he's like, all right, that's ready. Tomorrow's going to be a good day. I can feel it. He says his prayers. He kisses his wife goodnight. And they go to bed. Now when they wake up in the morning, there is a brand new pair of shoes in the exact style and shape that he had cut out, but finer looking than anything he has ever made with his own 2 hands. The stitching, immaculate. The other things that are features of shoes, I'm not a shoe person, wondrous. These shoes are so nice that he puts them on display in the window, and it only takes a few moments for a passerby to notice the splendor of these shoes, come inside and ask to buy them immediately on the spot, no questions asked. I don't even think they cared about the shoe size. Honestly, they were so wowed by the craftsmanship. So the man's like, okay, yeah, here's the shoes. Let me box them up for you. They cost, I don't know, 2 shekels. Money doesn't matter. It's not the point of the story. And the man's like, actually, I'm going to pay 4. I'm going to pay more. In fact, here, take 6. Take 6 shekels. And so the guy's like, oh my gosh, okay, wow, that's so amazing. And this man's like, no, these are the most beautiful shoes I've ever seen. I love them. I cannot wait to wear them around town. I don't care what size they are. I didn't ask any questions. I take my bag and I leave. So the man leaves. So the shoemaker and his wife are understandably confused because he didn't make the shoes. She didn't make the shoes. She's not a shoemaker. She's just the shoemaker's wife, and this is the way long ago, so that was kind of all she had to do, and I love that for her. But he's like, okay, well, great. I made this little bit of money. It's actually more than I expected. Am I going to go buy us some food? No. I'm going to go buy enough leather to make 2 shoes. And that's what he does. He goes and buys enough leather to make 2 shoes, does the same bit again, cuts them all out, sets it all up. And he's like, all right, in the morning, I'm going to make 2 pairs of shoes. Because why would there be 2 pairs of shoes in the morning? That's crazy. That can't happen twice. Lightning doesn't strike twice. But in this story, it in fact does. Because in the morning, they wake up, and there are 2 beautiful shoes. Wondrous, glorious, immaculate, sparkling, dazzling shoes, right? So he puts them up in the window, and the same thing happens again. More people show up, they buy these shoes immediately, they pay more than the asking price, and the man's like, great, we have a little bit of extra money. Should I buy us some food, wife? And before she can even answer, because she's not really a character in this story, you guys, I hate to let you down, he's like, actually, I'm gonna go buy enough leather to make 4 shoes. So that's what he does. He goes and buys enough leather to make 4 shoes. You guys can kind of guess what happens. He cuts it out. In the morning they wake up, there are 4 pairs of shoes, beautifully made. and they sell. And this goes on for quite a bit of time. I'm not going to keep doing the runaround for you guys. And they end up making, hand over fist, a butt ton of money doing no labor, exploiting the labor of an unseen workforce. I'm not going to get into it, but they're like, man, this is crazy. Every day I just cut the shoes out and then they're made in the morning. I'm not really asking any questions, but I am kind of wondering if at this stage in the game, should I like undercover boss it and maybe like scope out what's happening in my house at night to see like who keeps making these shoes for us? Because it's not the two of us. And his wife's like, yeah, I think we should. So they decide to stay up a little bit later than they usually do so that they can spy on the workshop and see who's making the shoes. And wouldn't you guys believe it, 2 little naked elves come out. They crawl out of the walls, which is terrifying. 2 little tiny naked men crawl out of the walls, and they see all the leather, they see all the shoe like forms and stuff, the laces, and they're like, okay, let's get to work. And they happily just get to work, and they're like, do, we're making all the shoes. And the husband and wife stay up all night, which is crazy because they are elderly, and they watch these 2 little elves make all the shoes, and they're like, oh my god, it's these 2 little guys. And the husband's like, I can't believe it, this whole time it's just been elves making the shoes. And the wife is sitting there and she's listening to her husband like go all crazy about how good these little elves are with their little tiny hands, and that's why their stitching is so fine because they're so small. And she's like, I don't care about any of that. Did you notice that they were naked? And he's like, well, yeah, I noticed that, but like, that's not what I'm saying here. What I'm saying is we could cut out more leather and we could continue to exploit them. And she's like, no. They were naked. And I feel like they've done so much for us. I'm going to make them tiny trousers, tiny shirts, tiny vests. I'm going to knit them some stockings, and I'm going to knit them little caps. And I guess you could actually help in this process. Like, I'm doing a lot of work now, too, and I feel like I might be the one getting exploited in this relationship. But you could make them tiny shoes. And he's like, I would love to make them tiny shoes. I haven't made shoes in ages. So he sets off to make little teeny tiny shoes, and the wife spends the entirety of the day making little teeny tiny clothes for these 2 little teeny tiny elves. And then they set them out very nicely. They do not set out any leather because, you know, it's a gift. We're going to give them a day off, right? Like, maybe they deserve some PTO. And they set out these things. They wait on the stairs to see these little elves come out. The elves come out and they are stupefied because there's nothing there. There's no work to do. So they're like, what do we do? But then they see the little clothes, the little outfits all cutely laid out. And they're like, oh my gosh. And the elves get super hyped, right? So they put on these little outfits and they start dancing around and skipping and hollering, and they're just having a great time. And they start singing a song, which I am not going to sing because I am not a singer, but I'm going to tell you the words. It's 2 lines. We can do it. Are we not boys, neat and fine? No longer cobblers shall we be. That's their whole song. Which, like, if I was the shoemaker and his wife, I'd be a little bit concerned. They were not. The elves have a fantastic time. They dance all over the house, all over the tables, the chairs, every surface, and then they just dance their way on out the front door of the house, never to return. But it was okay. Because by that point, the shoemaker and his wife were filthy, stinking rich, so they were able to actually hire some workers at like a living wage, and they continued to prosper and be successful in their shoemaking business. Until I'm pretty sure they retired and passed the shop on to somebody else. I don't really know. The story just sort of says they lived happily ever after. So that's what we're sticking to. And that's the end of my first story about elves. Story number 2. Also in the way, way long ago. This one starring a poor servant girl who just works for the lord of the manor, right? And she's doing her thing. She's scrubbing, she's doing the dishes, she's mopping, she's sweeping up around the house, she's keeping everything neat and tidy. That's her job. And she's actually really good at it and very diligent. And, she always, like, takes her sweepings out. She doesn't leave them in the house. She's a good quality worker. And one morning, she's carrying her little, like, pile of sweepings out of the house. She dumps them into the little pile she normally dumps them into. She goes inside to sweep up some more, comes back out with her second round, and then she's like, oh, wait, there's a little teeny tiny folded up piece of paper on the pile of sweepings that she had just tossed outside before. So she, of course, discards the sleeping she was carrying, and she picks up a little teeny tiny note, except that she's a poor servant girl and cannot read. So she goes to the lord of the manor, and she brings him the little teeny tiny note, which is like, imagine like fingernail, like, and thumb, like you're holding your index finger and your thumb, and like making a little tiny gesture, like you're making a gesture about something being tiny. That's how tiny the note is. It's teeny tiny. So she brings it to the lord of the manor, who has to get like his little reading glass on so he can read it, because he needs to be like magnified, right? And he reads it and he says, oh, hey, this letter is from the elves. It's for you, and they want you to be the godmother of one of their children, so they want you to come to the baptism. And she's like, I don't know any elves. What do I do? And he's like, you have to go. You can't tell the fairy folk that like you can't go. And she's like, well, I guess you're right. It would be really rude to decline an invitation from the small folk. So she goes. She goes up into the woods and she starts walking, and then the elves show up. 3 little elves show up. I don't know if these ones had clothes or not. It doesn't say in the story. I'm going to assume they did. And they show up and they're like, hey, come with us. We're here to take you to the baptism. And she's like, great. Awesome. I would love to go. This is a whole new experience for me. Never thought I would be having this experience in my regular day-to-day life. And they take her to a hollow mountain where all the elves live. And everything was small, which I can only imagine this is like a Gulliver's Travel situation for her. But somehow they manage. It's a big hollow mountain, so there's space for her, I'm imagining. She's not like squeezing into a claustrophobic tunnel, giving me a panic attack. That's not happening. She goes there. Everything is beautiful, right? More ornate, more decorated, more well-built than anything she's ever seen in all of her life. The village could never compare to what she's seeing in this hollow mountain. And she sees, they bring her to the house of the new mother who wanted her to be the godmother, right? And she's lying in a bed. It's like made of ebony wood, and it is decorated with pearls. Like, it's very fine, very fancy. And, even the blankets were gold. There was a cradle made out of ivory. The bathtub was gold. Like, they're living large underneath this mountain. They're living really well. And she showed up for the ceremony. She stood in as the godmother. She enjoyed, like, the party. And, then she went home. They were like, thanks for coming. We really appreciate you. And she's like, great, I'm a fairy's godmother. I don't know what to do with that for the rest of my life, but it's something that happened to me, and I guess I can tell people that. Maybe I can put it on my resume and get a better position. I don't know. So she heads home, and as she's on her way out, the elves are like, hey, before you leave, like, here's a bunch of gold. Thanks for coming. And she's like, great. So they fill up her pockets with gold, and they drape her with a bunch of fine jewels and stuff and pearls and things like that. And they're like, go on your way. And she's like, cool. So she's like, all right. So she goes back to the house where she works at, right? And she picks up her broom and she just starts sweeping away. Doesn't even put her jewelry away. Doesn't empty her pockets or nothing. She just gets right to work, because this is how diligent and like faithful and loyal and hardworking and dedicated she is, right? I could never. I'd be like, I have to rest. I just went to a party. I'm exhausted. But the people in the house come out, and it's people she's never seen before. She's like, are you guests? Like, I'm so sorry, am I in your way? And they're like, who the fuck is you? Who are you? Turns out, while she was away, it was not the day that she thought it was. The splendid afternoon she was having at this like little baptism. No. It was 7 years. The people who had owned that house, her former master, dead, gone. Everybody died, and that's the end of the story. There is no follow-through, no follow-up, nothing about anything that happens to her. I imagine she's well off. She left decked out in jewels, pockets full of gold. She probably lived comfortably for the rest of her life. And she probably tried to like get hired at that new house, or the new owner's same house. But the story doesn't tell us. It ends there. She just got lost in the fairy realm for 7 years. And the third story, which is slightly more upsetting to me, you'll see why, about elves, is very simple. Very, very simple. We're going to go through it so quickly. There was a mother who had a baby. The baby was stolen by elves. They came back, they replaced the baby with a changeling. This changeling had bulbous eyes and a big fat head, so she knew immediately that this baby was not her baby, okay? Like, they weren't even pretending like this baby was her baby. They weren't like shapeshift or do some fairy glamour or anything like that to cover up this baby's face so she won't notice, at least for a couple of days. They were like, no, just put that big head baby in there, since we took her other baby, her normal head baby. So, she sees it and she's like, what do I do? And she doesn't know what else to do but treat it like her baby because she knows the fairy folk took her child, and there's not really much she can do about it. So she tries to take care of this baby. Turns out this baby is horrible. Screams all day, all night, and it only wants to eat and drink and sleep. That's all the baby wants to do, which in that baby's defense is kind of what all babies want to do. But she gets really stressed out because this is like round the clock, more so than your average baby. Like, this baby is ravenous. So she's like, okay, I can't take this anymore. So she goes next door to her neighbor. She tells him what's happening. She's like, hey, the fairy folk left a changeling in my house. I've been trying to take care of it. I feel like I might not be a good mom because this baby's really testing me. And the neighbor's like, okay. Here's what you do when you have a changeling, because this is a very common occurrence for us. You take the changeling, you bring it to the kitchen, put the baby on a hearth, right? Make a fire. Put some water into some eggshells. You know, like split some eggs, empty them out, put water in there. Put the eggshells on the hearth over the fire and let them boil. This should make the changeling laugh. And once the changeling laughs, everything will go back to normal. And she's like, the fuck did you just say to me? Like, what? You want me to make boiled water in eggshells? And he said, yeah, if you don't want my help, don't come ask me for advice. Go be a horrible mom to a changeling. And she was like, you know what, you're right. I'm actually going to go over there and do exactly what you said. So she takes the changeling to the kitchen. She sets it in front of the hearth. She sets a fire. She cracks some eggs. She boils some water inside some eggs. And turns out, guys, now, in the story it says, the blockhead said, which is rude. It's just a baby. But not really. It says, now, I am as old as the Wester wood, but have never seen anyone cooking in shells. And then it begins to laugh. And it starts cracking up. And when it starts laughing, a bunch of little elves appear. And they're like, hey, here's your baby. They set her baby on the hearth. And then they take the changeling away. And that's the end of the story. And you guys, that's everything I have to tell you. That's the whole shebang. That is The Elves by Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm. And honestly, not very well written stories. They do not have satisfying conclusions for me. I need a little bit more meat to them. But also, a harrowing tale of what it's like to deal with the Fae folk. And also, why you shouldn't give them gifts, because once you do, they're going to stop making shoes for you. But also, maybe don't exploit the unseen working class. I don't know what to say. I will honestly go into a rant, so I'm not going to do that. But that first story made me feel some kind of way about capitalism, and I thought about it for a really long time if I was going to share it with you guys, but then I decided to share all three stories because, they're wonky, and they're also upsetting in the sense that I find fairies to be unnerving, and this is why. But also, justice for poor blockhead baby. Like, yeah, he maybe wasn't supposed to be there and was kind of a pig, but, like, still shaped like a baby. So, yeah, that's everything I have to say, you guys. I hope that you enjoyed this. I know it's not super seasonal, but we talk about elves this time of year, so why not a tale about, the wee folk? Here we go. I hope that you guys enjoyed this one. Let me know if you have, like, a weird tale about elves that maybe I could share here, because maybe I'll do that for the rest of the month, is tell elf stories. I don't know. I'm not committed to that bit. But if you guys have some suggestions, then I'll definitely do that if you have those. But that's going to be it for me for this time, you guys. If you made it to the end of the video, I appreciate your faces. And I will catch you all in the next one. Until then, happy crafting, guys. Bye!